You now have a collection view that displays a series of numbers in a list. It's not that exciting. In this challenge, I want you to get familiar with how compositional layouts work and change the current layout from a list to a column-based grid. The number of columns is up to you. It can be 2, 3, even 5. Remember that compositional layouts are composed together using sections, groups, and items, so you'll want to modify the sizes of those items to achieve your end goal. Let's also get in some light practice with auto layout. To make your collection view look decent in a grid layout, you will need to center the text inside the cell. If you get that done and want an additional challenge, try adding some spacing between each item. I'm not going to give you any hints on this one. Try and spend some time in the documentation or in Stack Overflow to get you on the right path. Don't worry if you can't figure it out, I'll be showing you how to do it. Pause the video and come back when you're ready. The first thing you're going to do is navigate to main.storyboard and select the text label, either from the editor itself or in the document outline. And we're going to delete all associated constraints. You can do that by navigating to the size inspector and just deleting them right here. You want to center this label horizontally and vertically inside the cell. So with the label selected, click on the Align button in the Auto Layout submenu and check both horizontally in container and vertically in container and add the two constraints. This way, regardless of what type of grid layout you create, the number should always be centered inside the cell. Let's navigate back to viewcontroller.swift. To change your current layout from a list to a grid, all you need to do is change a single number. The size of an item is currently defined in the configure layout method with a fractional width of 1 and a fractional height of 1. To change to a 2-column grid, all you need to do is indicate that each item only takes up half the size of the group. Let's change the width dimension to be a fractional width of 0.5. Build and run the app, and just like that, you'll see a 2-column grid layout. This is where compositional layouts really shine. It might seem like a lot at first to build a layout object, cells, and a data source, but once in place, building more complex layouts doesn't take a lot of extra code. Now, while you're here, let's see what else you can do. Technically, this is a grid layout, but it doesn't look like it. Let's go back to main.storyboard and add a background color to make the cell pop. With the cell selected, look in the document outline and find the content view. With the content view selected in the document outline, change the background color property in the attributes inspector to anything interesting. So I'm going to change this to system purple. You might need to change the text color as well to be a bit more readable, and I'll set that to white color. Let's build and run the app again. Always a good idea to make sure you didn't break anything with your changes. Okay, you have purple cells now, but nothing else has changed, and it's still not obvious that this is a grid. What you need here is to add spacing between each item in the layout so it's obvious. You can achieve this using content insets on each item. You can think of a content inset as padding or white space that you add to an item in 4 directions: top, leading, trailing, and bottom. Back in View Controller, the item you defined earlier contains a content insets property. To this, you can assign an instance of NS directional edge insets. Let's define a 2-point spacing in all directions. These content inset values can be positive, which then insets the content inside of the item, or they can be negative, which causes the content to grow outside of the item. Build and run, and you should see padding around each cell. Pretty cool, right? With compositional layouts, it's really easy to modify our layout to suit our needs. Let's say you wanted a 5-column grid with each cell having an equal width and height. That sounds like a lot of math, right? Well, with compositional layouts, it's a breeze. Let's start with the width of the item. So we want 5 items to fit in one row, which means you want an item's width to be whatever the group's width is divided by 5, which is 20%. So we'll change the fractional width here on the item size to be 0.2. By changing the width dimension to have a fractional width of 0.2, you've got a 5-column layout. Let's add some more padding to our layout to give it some breathing room. So we'll do 5 points instead of 2. Now for the height of the item. You could change the value of the height dimension on item size, but let's leave that alone. Instead, we're going to change the height of the group. Since the item's height is 100% the height of the group, it will match the change. Right now, the group's height dimension is defined as an absolute value of 44 points, right here. We want the height of the group to match the width of an item so that we end up with a square. Again, this might seem complicated, but remember that the item's width is defined relative to its parent, and we can use that same relationship. The item's width is 20% or 0.2 of the group's width. Since the group's measurements are relative to its parent, the section, we can define the group's height to be 20% of the section's width as well. If you remember our discussion earlier, we can form a relationship between a width and a height or vice versa. So let's change the group's height dimension to have a fractional width relationship of 0.2. So the group's height, to reiterate, is going to be 20% of its parent or the section's width. Let's build and run. And you can see how quickly and easily you went from a layout that resembled a table view to a 5-column, evenly spaced grid with equal height and width items.